Welcome to the Three Seasons Podcast, Episode 2 with Dan Kyte. I'm your host, Tyson Ekasaka, and on the Three Seasons Podcast, our aim is always to talk about the three seasons of wealth: accumulation, protection, and succession.
For coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Tyson. I've appreciated getting to know you over the last few months, and appreciate your approach to the idea of holistic wealth planning, including the idea of where do people want to help others give back with their resources, including their investments. So
Totally.
really thankful to have a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, no worries. I actually really enjoy our conversations that we've had. I like your approach. I like your guys' social media, that it's business and it's family and everybody's involved, and so I really enjoy kind of getting to know you on that level too. And it's been cool, and it's only been a couple of months.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic.
So I'd love to get into a little bit and let you talk a little bit about GiveWise and like how did you guys get into this space? And I guess before we dive too much into what you do, is one of the questions that I wanted to ask that I think the audience would really want to know is, like, on a basic level, what is a donor advised fund, and how does this work? How do you explain it to people?
Yeah, sure. So a donor advised fund, I think the best parallel for a advised fund is to a think of it as a charitable bank account. Uh, with a regular bank account with, let's say, a credit union or one of the chartered banks, um, you've got money in, so your deposits, you've got a balance that fluctuates, and then you have a plethora of ways that that money goes out, whether it be um, for to pay bills for personal expenses, like clothes and groceries, for holidays. You've got all kinds of different choices as to where to spend the money that has been a balance in your bank account. And so a donor advised fund, think of it as charity. So it's a centralizer, just like your bank account is a centralizer for your funds. Because if we didn't have a bank account and we just kind of left cash lying all over the place, that would be hard to keep track of. Whereas a donor advised fund, and a well-run donor advised fund, especially one that's online, um, can really take that place of as a charitable bank account. And so you've got um, contributions in that represent your donations. So in terms of when we're thinking donations that are tax receivable, um, a donor advised fund facilitates um, the donations in, and a donor advised fund can only be run by uh, a registered charity, registered Canadian charity. And so your contributions in are donations, and they're tax receivable. And what happens with a DAF, instead of getting a whole bunch of tax receipts all over the place, you're centralizing your giving so that your tax receipt gets consolidated and aggregated for the year, and you end up with just one tax receipt, and you have a balance that you can then when we think about, when we talked about the bank account in terms of spending the money, giving out to the charities that you and causes you care about, that's the spending of your charitable dollars. And
Yeah.
so for instance, GiveWise is tied right in with the CRA Charities Directorate database. So all approximately 86,000 charities in Canada are now at your disposal to give out to when it makes sense for you to give those funds out. And so that's the basics of a DAF. But what's really where it becomes really exciting too is the thought of legacy. So people who have been able to, let's say, build a business, or they have an asset that they sell, and they have a large tax bill, and they want to give a large donation, but they don't necessarily know which charities they want to give to right away, or they know that they only want to give it away over the next 10 years because it's a large amount, let's say in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, or at least the tens of thousands. What they can do is, in the meantime, the donor can have a DAF like GiveWise invest. So GiveWise will work directly with their financial advisors, such as yourself, Tyson, and your team, and and then working together with the financial advisor, those funds can be invested. And what's really cool is then the charitable account can grow, and the donor has more money to give away. The financial advisor has a chance to have that deepened level of relationship with the client, because when we start talking about the causes and charities that are near and dear to us, we get to know each other on a better level, a deeper level, and there's trust that ensues. And so we just feel that DAFs. I've become a bit of a DAF geek. I get really excited about them because I'm only touching the tip of the iceberg in terms of the flexibility they offer. Because there's all kinds of complex scenarios, in complex income structures, complex asset structures that people have, and they come to us and say, how can we be charitable with this? And GiveWise is solutions oriented, and DAFs offer the flexibility to really help people be creative with their charitable giving and how they structure it.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. That's fantastic. I know that we have a mutual friend in the industry, and one of his taglines is most people give cash, check, and credit card, which is like the most inefficient dollar-wise way for you to be charitable. And
Mm-hmm.
I know we'll probably get into some of that in a little bit, but yeah, it's the solutions that you can craft and create. Some of the exterior like tax benefits and legacy planning benefits, they're really wild once you start to unpack them and think how much they can do. And most people don't know, because most financial advisors don't even know. So how are they supposed to tell their clients?
Yeah, yeah. So we look forward to continuing the conversations and education. All of us, it takes time, and so it's taken me. We've been in this 6 years, and lights have been really turning on, especially in the last couple of years. I studied it heavily and intensely, and it takes time, in terms of seeing the scenarios and using donor advised funds, DAFs. Um, because there's someone will come along with a way that they've used it, and a light goes on, and it's like, okay. So hey, at a basic level, they're fantastic. It gets really exciting, but I definitely don't, you as financial advisors, with all of the regulatory environment you need to know and operate in, hey, I don't expect you to know everything about DAFs. That's why we exist, is to help you, to help your clients, and you can use us as a resource, um, to and lean on us
Absolutely.
for your ideas of how you could use DAFs with your clients.
Yeah. And that's been a huge theme for myself and for like our business the last couple of years, is the power of collaboration.
Mm,
We don't want to be the guy like the Swiss Army knife that's kind of good at everything. And we'd rather have experts in fields that we can contact and say, hey, we know like the top person in this area, talk to Dan
yeah,
and the team and get your advice. And same thing, like in all the other areas, um, you can't specialize in everything. It's just
yeah,
impossible.
yeah, yeah. Agreed.
So you guys have been with GiveWise for a couple of years, you were saying, and I love the story of like how you guys got involved, what happened, and how you transitioned into that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with GiveWise?
Yeah, sure. You know, going back, so GiveWise has been around for just over 6 years now. But going back about 8 years or so, uh, my wife Tammy and I were single family home builders. We owned we were very successful at it. We were very thankful. We just seemed to have amazing clients, amazing team of trades. That were experts in their own field, and so that as a builder, I didn't have to know the electrical code, but I was blessed to have an electrician who had that knowledge. And so I enjoyed what I was doing, wasn't looking for a new career, but we had always been givers. And as a business owner would know, income profiles do this. And especially, for instance, in the construction industry, 2008, everything, the tap shut off. but we always knew that the charities that we supported, whether it be, you know, our church, community initiatives, other charities out there, they need to keep the lights on, they need to pay their staff, they need steady income. And so how do you keep your income or your giving steady as a donor to the charities that you care about, you know, and that you have invested in. And donor advised funds were introduced to us by a mentor of mine in the financial industry, and we realized, wow, okay, this can really help. But at the time, even 8 years ago, you're talking about high barriers to entry. They were for the really wealthy people in general. Like you need to give $50,000, $100,000 just to get started. Some of them were even $250,000
Yeah.
minimum. So it was like, oh, these are for the serious philanthropists, this solution. But then it was interesting. We were introduced to that. Um, our giving was complicated because I gave to between 7 and 12 charities a year. I actually had a color-coded spreadsheet to keep track of all of my donations. Whether at that time, 8 years ago, a lot of your tax receipts were given were the tax receipts were mailed, like as in post, like a piece of paper that
Yeah.
I needed to hand to my accountant, and some were starting to come via email. Our church even still had these boxes that were alphabetized, like, you know, K to L and all of that. And so I, you know, and so it was hard to keep track of all of it. And it was like, oh, have we given as much as this year as we thought we had? Sometimes it would come to the end of the year and we would realize that a charity that we like to support, oh, have we given to them or not? So um, what was really cool is only a couple of years after being introduced to DAFs as a concept, a group came through a friend in another friend in the financial industry. Um, he came to us with a possible social impact investment in a software company that was wanting to, what it was, quote unquote, democratize donor advised funds.
Yeah.
And so we went in as a social impact investment into this. And it was North America wide. And we were, we just, we had such a keen interest in it that the founders, the original founders, asked us to come along and say, do you want to be co-founders in this with us? Do you want to also be on the board of the not-for-profit side of this whole thing? Because the technology play was a for-profit so that it could support the not-for-profit side. And so every DAF has some tech, and most have a for-profit, some sort of for-profit enterprise that needs to support the foundation. And so we invested, we became keenly interested. We went along on this ride just part-time off the corner of our desk. We were trying to help this group get it started because DAFs are expensive to run traditionally, and they were building technology that would reduce the cost of running a DAF so that the minimums could come down. That was the idea, and we really resonated with that. Long story short, it didn't take us too long to be willing to walk away from our single family home building business. We were in the place that I wasn't, not like I'm in the financial place that I could just retire and kick back and do nothing, but we were in a comfortable spot where it was like I didn't need a paycheck from week to week in order to survive. We were in a very comfortable financial position. And really, my wife, Tammy, comes from a high net worth family. And so we were going through estate planning with them, and we just realized that there's a confluence here where, wow, we could be involved in making a dent in the way that charitable giving is done in Canada for Canadians. And the US and Canada play that this original group offered was really interesting. It was also tied in with banks and people being able to donate directly in their online banking.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that didn't work out. We tried really hard, but compliance and regulators, the bean counters and the lawyers of the banks, and it was one of the largest banks in the world that we were working with, they just they couldn't make it, they couldn't marry the full idea of full charitable giving right inside of the bank account with all of the regulations they're under. Software got purchased, software side got purchased by a bigger company. And then as it was called GiveClear at the time, and as GiveClear, we we were told that the new software company wasn't interested in working in Canada. And so with some of the co-founders from Canada, we looked long and hard and said, you know what? We've built something here that is really, really cool as a foundation, and we've gotten started, and people are loving what we're doing and the service we're providing. Let's go for it. Let's build our own software. And so we, in 2022, we had to very quickly build a new software platform, and we got our first iteration out just as the whole other software company pulled out, and so we're on our own platform now, and we had to rebrand from GiveClear to GiveWise. I say that because some people look at they go back and look at our records as a foundation, as a public foundation. They say, why were you called GiveClear? And then all of a sudden GiveWise. So because of some US some branding issues and whatnot, we just decided, hey, we'll rebrand, make it easy for GiveClear to keep going down in the US. And so we've been GiveWise as of 2022.
Okay.
So that was a long explanation, but
No, that's cool.
yeah,
I always love to hear the backstory because sometimes you never know how somebody arrives at the point that they're at now.
yeah,
And you get some wild stories when you ask that question, like where did it come from and how did it start? And I
yeah,
think that's
yeah,
really cool.
yeah, yeah. We were in we were intrigued enough to walk away from what was a successful business in order to hopefully make that dent that I was talking about.
Yeah,
That's the
that's
short answer.
that's cool. No, that's really
Yeah,
cool. Because a lot of people stay in that business, right? Because it's successful and it produces and it's
yeah,
predictable. And then I eventually you also get comfortable with it too. Like why would you want a new challenge when you have something that already works?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Here I was at 45 years old, and I don't know, as a guy, it's kind of nice to be in the position that you kind of know some stuff. It was like I had figured some things out. People were starting to ask me questions. I wasn't the new kid on the block. I was able to to contribute to our municipal some decisions that were being made about how building permits were being issued. Like there was all kinds of really neat things happening. I could have just mailed it in and been comfortable because we were also getting referrals to build some multi-million-dollar homes that were just gorgeous, right? And so yeah, could have kept going there in that way. And so at 45, it was a little bit daunting to go from somebody who knew some things and was being relied upon as a bit of a mentor in some aspects to being the person in the room who knew the least for quite a long time there. So that was disconcerting, but it also, serves as a good testimony for if you've got something on your heart, um, it's not too late to try it out. And yeah, there's some leaps of faith into an unknown. Maybe feels like you're walking off a cliff sometimes, but or as one of the founders of the original play that we were doing in the US, he said it felt quite often like he was jumping out of a plane without a parachute when he switched careers because he switched from a very successful career with IBM and Oracle to
okay,
to jump into this at 50 years old. So
right.
yeah, yeah,
That's interesting. It's funny because like in our age demographic,
hmm,
when we were 20 years old, like a 50 or
yeah,
55-year-old person, that was like they got one foot in the grave, like they were old. And
yeah, yeah,
nowadays we look at, 55, 60, 65-year-olds. They're like 30 years younger than they used to be.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's amazing kind of like what's happening. And so, yeah,
yeah,
when you're 50 years old now, you might be ready for a second career or a second go at
yeah,
it and have another
yeah,
20-year run.
yeah. There might be lots of runway left, right? And so yeah, Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, it's although my kids who are in their early 20s might look at you and laugh and say, "Oh, our dad's old."
Yeah, yeah.
But you know,
They don't have
I
that same
agree with you
reference point.
fully. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So we've talked a little bit about a piece of the business breaking off and going to the US. And I think that's a great kind of like segue to talk a little bit about some of the differentiation because donor advised funds are huge in the US. And
Yeah.
it feels like it's catching up in Canada, but you would be the expert to talk a little bit on that. Like, how do you feel like we are in terms of like the pace and the acceptance and maybe the common knowledge?
Yeah, great question. And what it does is by asking that and you know by my explaining this, hopefully people, the listeners, the viewers can catch on that we're at the start of a wave that is building in terms of third party giving. So not just DAFs and donor advised funds, but third party, you know, digital giving and intermediaries that are helping connect donors and their charities and being that transactor in between. I believe that Canada is just starting to ride a wave that in the US is building in their I don't know where the top of the wave is, but they're way up the wave in terms of there's a lot of pushing momentum in the US. So we always look at it this way: 10 times the population. So then are there 10 times the amount of similar service, or you know, 1/10 of the amount of similar services in Canada as there are in the US?
Yeah.
Um, there are only a handful of donor advised funds in Canada, and there are over 1,200 DAFs in the US.
Okay.
So, and that has risen in the last 5 to 7 years. It's been just, it's the sector has, and it's been experiencing tremendous growth. So you can imagine that you're talking about now it's hundreds of billions of dollars that are in the DAF space in the US, whereas what we've seen even 5, 7 years ago in the US, it wasn't even close to that. It's really been accelerating. So DAFs have been growing by 20% year over year in terms of the number of people using them in
Okay.
the US. And so we've seen that in Canada, but like, you know, 20% of five, a 20% growth is one person, right? Whereas a 20% growth um, of 100,000 is huge, and so people are using DAFs. It's not ubiquitous. Like by no means is it, you know, now the number one way that giving is done in the US, but for more and more people, it is prevalent in the US. And what's happened is charities at first looked at any sort of transactor that they had to use as a, oh, maybe this is a buffer. You're removing us from contact with our donors. You're providing, you're distancing us from our donors, and donor advised funds were being criticized for that, and the idea of charities were looking at them like, I don't want to deal with you. I want to deal directly with my donor. Fine, we don't want to get in the way at all. What we want to do is we want to enhance. Um, I'm not going to say that all DAFs operate for that um, for that common good. Some of the obviously some of the larger, like let's face it, Fidelity Charitable is the largest charity in the world now,
Okay.
in terms of the number of dollars that move through it and the number of people that donate, because really um, they run the largest DAF in the world. Um, the you know, I'm not criticizing Fidelity themselves. I can see though how, okay, Fidelity mutual funds are one of the, I mean, Fidelity is one of the best known names in the world in terms of the financial world.
That's right.
Well, US DAFs have been accused of creating parking lots for the ultra wealthy who don't want to part with they want the tax receipt, but they don't want to part with the dollars. And maybe they want to have a large amount of money still in the family, kind of, even though they don't own the assets, the DAF is notionally attached to their family name, and maybe it's an ego thing, like there are different reasons for people to have either private family foundations that aren't always altruistic. But that we've found, encouragingly, I've found a very small percentage of either DAF operators or people who own DAFs, found a very small percentage of people to not want to be generous. Like most people, the vast majority of people want to be generous, but the DAF as a vehicle in Canada is following between that 5 and 7 years behind. And charities in the US that have now switched over to embracing donor advised funds as, oh, okay, this isn't, it's like an alternate form of revenue. It's a vehicle, and a well-run DAF actually provides us with the ability to still communicate with their donors the way we did before, but it actually is providing donors a better service, and the donors are giving more because they're saving more tax. They're finding it more convenient. Like all of the benefits of DAFs for the donors, the charities that are thriving in the US in terms of accepting and really embracing donor advised funds, they're the ones that are set to ride this wave and benefit from the wave of increased third party giving mechanisms. And
Okay.
so the message to Canadian charities is get ready and be DAF ready, be DAF embracing, and you'll see benefits. That's my strong belief.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I wonder sometimes what the resistance is, and I think it could depend on who's running things because we're all sort of adverse to change, especially when you feel like control is being taken from you.
Yeah.
Whereas, early in my career, I was at the credit union when they were really pushing online banking, internet banking, and everyone thought
Okay. Yeah.
the internet's going to take my money, and there was massive resistance to it. But now we can
Yep.
do everything on our phone. Like we don't have to go
Yep.
into the branch and wait in
Yep.
line and talk to somebody. We can get the transaction done right now. But there
Yep.
was like 15 years of like adverse like skepticism. I will never use online banking.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, all those, retirees that were resistant to it, they could have been on vacation and done their banking and done whatever. And I kind of feel
Mm-hmm.
like DAFs is fitting into a scenario like that where it's a conduit and it will reach more people than some of these charities can because they only have so many like man hours, they only have so much manpower to get out
Yep.
there and spread their message and drum up business. And like you're the conduit, the parking lot, like for those donation dollars that they can kind of donate now and decide later like where it's going to be allocated.
Yeah. Yeah. And um, the criticism of DAFs is, oh, well, maybe people really like the parking lot and they want to sit there, and the vehicle doesn't, the key turns off once they arrive there and doesn't turn back on. But what we're seeing is, for instance, GiveWise has dispersed, had an over 30% dispersal rate
Okay.
all of the years we've operated. And that being said, we've actually grown. We've doubled in size every year except 2022. So for 6 years, we've doubled in size, doubled again, doubled again. And then 2022, the markets were horrible for everybody, both equity and income side. And so we didn't quite double, but we still grew. What's really interesting, and it'll be interesting for us to see, is people have gotten so comfortable with using the platform and giving large gifts, that we've actually granted out more to this point this year than we've taken in.
Okay.
So, in terms of contributions into GiveWise DAFs, we're kind of still a little bit ahead of last year. Usually, what happens is giving season is like the last 3 months for charities. No matter what part of the sector you're in, the last 3 months are go time in terms of donations, right? And DAFs experience the same thing. Giving season is what we call it, in the sector, but so far we've grown in terms of contributions in, but what's happened is we've actually really grown in terms of grants out to the charities, and we've given away more than we've brought in as a donor advised fund. So our dispersal rate is over 100%. And so the industry standard in Canada has been about 17%.
Yep.
So, but what you have to remember, and those quite often what it's been is endowment type thinking. People who have a massive event happen in their lives, and they might not have given even close to as much of a donation if they had to find a charity or charities to give all of that money away to right away. So they would have just paid taxes.
Yeah.
Whereas they've had the opportunity now to inject the money into this charitable sector, never to leave the charitable. It's a closed system now, and all of that money eventually has to find its way to the charitable sector,
Yeah.
into individual charities.
Yeah. I think that's yeah, I think that's such a cool thing. And I know if a lot more people had a mechanism to do that, is they would give to, their university that they went to, or their,
Yep.
their local school that supported them, or, like a lot of smaller organizations that are in the community, they have a charitable component. So you can leave a legacy in your community that every year, maybe it's a scholarship for kids or something.
Yeah.
It's a great mechanism to be able to do that. And I know on the GiveWise platform is you can actually look up, you search your community and it'll come up with all the registered charities in your community by name,
Yeah.
and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. We love the idea of localized giving, nationalized giving, and then knowing that Canada is one of the most privileged places on earth to live. There's a lot of countries with a lot of basic needs that we take for granted here:
Yeah,
shelter and clean water, and food security, and good food, like healthy food. Lots of places in the world need um, need help, need a hand up, and so we like the local, national, and international components that the charities in Canada that you can give to represent.
yeah, that's great. Um, what's sort of like the most regular type of transaction that you guys see for, new clients or maybe even existing clients that maybe we should talk about to bring more regularity to it?
Um, the In terms of contributions into donor advised funds, is that what
Sure.
you mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Um,
a double-edged question because, money's got
yeah.
to come in to be donated, but then it gets
Yeah.
dispersed to the appropriate
Yeah.
place.
Right. So what we like to see is the rise of creativity. So people are getting used to the idea that, hey, if I donate an appreciated security, so if I have mutual funds that have a base cost, when I invested let's say $15,000 in, and now it's worth 10 times more, it's $150,000. If I was to start taking that out, I'm paying a lot of tax on that. Whereas if I donate some of it, a portion of that investment, whether it be a stock, bond, mutual fund, basically any sort of registered security and non-registered security. Um, if I donate it directly to the charity, I bypass the capital gains tax.
Yeah.
So uh, that one's the big tax saver, because you're not only getting your donation tax receipt for the value of whatever it is you've donated, you are bypassing the the capital gains tax, which we all know, especially for the big ones, 250 plus, 250,000 plus, went up to 2/3 of inclusion rate. So that means you're paying more tax on bigger amounts. So this is where what's really interesting, and I know you guys deal with medical practitioners, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a focus of your practice, and I've learned, I didn't know this, and maybe not all the public knows this, but a lot of doctors, um, they incorporate, and so they have a business, or a dentist will build a practice, and then their retirement quite often was, okay, I'm going to sell my practice, and then I'm going to have there's going to be some sort of large capital gain involved. And now you're telling me that all this hard work I've done, you know, is going to be taxed at a higher rate, or more of it's going to be taxed. Um, I feel for the doctors and the dentists and the chiropractors, like the medical practitioners in our country now, with this new tax system, or these new measures that have been just enacted this year. So the idea is, okay, well, if we do some tax planning, and perhaps we also, so the next level of maybe complexity, or what gets me excited, is we can arrange for preferred shares of a privately held corporation to be donated and then purchased by the person who's purchasing the business or the assets,
Yeah,
back, so that the original person who built the business can donate those shares, those preferred shares, get a tax receipt for that, so it reduces their taxes. It creates a nice sized giving fund for them to now, if they're selling their business, that usually means that they're maybe in the twilight of their working careers, and or maybe they're fully retiring, and now they get a chance to have some serious dollars to give to the charities that they care about. So
absolutely.
pref shares of closely held private corporations are also on the table. So that's another way of transacting with a DAF that we get excited about.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I mean, that's kind of what do they call it here? They call it like the $10 trillion wave, right? All of the baby boomers and the generation just
Mm,
below that, they're going to be selling their businesses or transitioning it to the next
yeah,
generation. And how do you do that? What is the tax implication? Because most of these guys, they started at zero. And so if you look at the
yeah,
value of their shares and the value of the business
yeah,
now, I mean, there's
yeah,
going to be a large tax bill.
yeah,
And who's going to pay it?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there are creative ways to be generous and reduce your taxes at the same time, um, and offset some of that big tax bill.
Yeah, is they've been on a growth campaign and buying up books of business.
Mm,
This might be a strategy for them to uh, buy out the book of business and maybe get a discount on it.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
there you go. See, the flexibility brings light bulbs on in people's minds, and there's all
Absolutely.
kinds of creative ideas that result.
That's right. Yeah, I really like
Yeah.
the creative side of the planning because yeah, it used to be like especially when I started in the industry, it's like this is the formula, right? Like 1 + 1 = 2, and then there's your retirement. And
Yeah.
that's really not the case. The
Hmm.
more you unpack things, because
Yeah.
hardly ever do you have two family situations that are identical. They start at the same place. They have the
Hmm.
same, issues along the way. They have the same amount of children. There's a multitude of complexities and variables, and the creative side is the side that is really interesting, keeps you engaged. It's fun, and then you go through the
Yeah.
whole story, with your clients, and it makes the end result so much more like impactful on both ends.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And ultimately, I think that financial advisors have a chance to journey with people. So my dad's a financial advisor. He's now in his early 70s, and he still loves his job. He's on like third generation clients,
Yeah.
um, and he knows all kinds of their family stories because they've leaned on especially certain clients will be transactional, but lots of clients will be relational.
Yes.
And so as a financial advisor, um, especially with people who feel like they without some advice, they would second guess every financial decision they make, and they feel a bit adrift without that grounding, and that expertise that you provide. Um, that results in you being a trusted, I mean, it's the word is there, advisor. So, trusted member of these people's group of advisors in life. And I love that aspect. And that's what my dad has valued the most in his career.
That's cool. I really like to hear those
Yeah.
stories of like, you had the inside track, right? And
Yeah.
you get to
Yeah.
see all that. 'Cause, I mean, like my kids have grown up around the business, in and around the business, and there's been times where I've taken, calls in the car, and I was like driving my daughter to campus. She was in university, and I was driving
Yeah.
her there, and she got to listen to a call, and then we finished the call, and then she's like, "I knew the answer to that. Like, he should have done
Yeah.
this, and he could have done this," and it's like, yeah, that's right, because she's been around it for so long that
Oh, yeah.
they
Yeah.
absorb a lot of it through osmosis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That
For
is
sure.
definitely, it's one of the questions that I have on here for you, is that one of the things I really like about you is your super positive attitude, um, and the outlook that you have towards everything. But I want to know, like, um, how did you, what did you learn or develop along your journey in business and in your current career that kind of affected, your business decisions, your family success, and there's a thread that kind of runs through all of it. But I wonder if there's a way that you look at it, or if there was an event that helped you become as positive and as have the outlook that you have.
Well, I'll give a ton of credit to my parents. My dad listened to Tony Robbins tapes when they came in a big cassette, this kind of vinyl binder thing, and there's all these cassettes. And my dad has always been a power of positive thinking person, and he has a massive influence on my life and my family. And my mom has always been rock solid that way too. And so it's family, so it's nurturing. I think I'm an optimistic realist. So it's not like I can always see the sunshine of in a situation immediately, but I've had people around me. So my wife Tammy has grit and determination, and she just never gives up on any kind of situation. That's why she keeps beating me in tennis all the time. Um, but uh, uh, but yeah, I mean, and then I mean, I would be remiss to not mention faith. I mean, I feel like my faith journey has been less about because people who attend church regularly or attend a temple or they can learn a lot of religion, but I think the threads that I've taken from it have been with my dad's sunny outlook on life, and then you take the idea that God really does love us, that whatever power in the universe you believe exists, I believe there is an opportunity to see that there's a lot more good going on. Otherwise, this world would just implode. Like the media wants to force us to think this way. People can lose hope if you were to just watch the news day in,
Yeah,
day out. That's maybe another thing is my wife and I we don't watch the news.
that's right.
Um, and So choosing to think that for this world to actually keep moving forward, 99.5% of people are waking up every morning and with a commitment to be just an inherent commitment to be kind to others, to be productive and resourceful, and to kind of take advantage of the body and the health they have to create something positive, to have some sort of creative output into the world. So 8 billion of us, if 99.5% of 8 billion of us are doing that, then I think that there is a chance for us to look at the world as kind of the old saying, going to hell in a handbasket. Yeah, you could look at there being trouble and strife, but if you go back in history, there's been accounts where things haven't been so peachy, but yet humanity, uh, here we are. in a place where, for the most part, humanity is in a positive space. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying there aren't hurts out there. There's, of course, this life has challenges, sadness. There's medical diagnoses that are happening right now that people that are devastating for people. I'm not saying that it's all sunshine and roses, but overall, the world, for it to keep operating, people have to be thinking thinking of others and ready to act for others,
Yeah.
um, for the mutual benefit of all.
Right.
So that's kind of a bit of my philosophy on staying positive.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. I think it's
I
really cool.
appreciate the question.
Oh, no worries. That's one of the things that it was never something that we talked about, but it was how you
Yeah,
talked. And it was like, man, you're so positive. You're so, um, the lens that you look through was so refreshing because in a world where, it's like, hey, we're fighting against markets going up and down and we're fighting against pricing on products. And, really we talk to clients when they have problems because we solve their problems.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so to have that lens that you look through is very refreshing. And it's like, I think we need to rekindle that every once in a while. So I appreciated it. Um,
Awesome.
was
Yeah.
there anything that you wanted to talk about today that I haven't asked, or something that we should cover that you think is important that I haven't phrased or brought up?
Um, no, I really appreciate your line of questions. I mean, off the top of my head, I think that, you've covered the major aspects of what's going on, in, you know, the charitable space as it concerns DAFs. I will say that if any of what we've talked about, because we did go into down some of the complexity routes and whatnot, and finding solutions for complex situations, one thing I am the most excited about and the most proud of that GiveWise has accomplished so far, along with there's a couple of other donor advised funds that do this well as well, is that we are democratizing the donor advised fund. We have created a platform that takes 3 to 5 minutes to sign up for, is free to use for balances under $25,000. So the average everyday Canadian, if you give to even one charity year and you want a place that you will have, oh, this is something that we've talked about a little bit offline, but is the idea of chronicling your journey,
Yeah.
having your giving journey in one spot. So if I was to look back now at 6 years worth of GiveWise, my GiveWise account, I can now see my entire giving history. So how much money I put in, all my tax receipts are still available there in terms of contributions into my account. But then all of the gifts I've given out to the charities over those 6 years are in there. And now when I click on an individual charity, um, I see the aggregate total of the entire time I've had my giving account with GiveWise, the amount I've given to that charity in total, and the current year, what I've given for that current year as well.
Okay.
So the idea of having a journal or a chronicle, numbers tell a story, and as financial advisors we know that, right? Numbers tell a story. And so I'm just really thankful to have now an opportunity. My kids, we have a share funds feature, so I can give into my GiveWise account, get my tax receipt, and I can let my kids, I can share funds out to my kids GiveWise accounts, and they can give to the charities that they care about, but they also then can give some of their own money. So they've been in, university and just starting out with work careers. So they can give a few $100s, maybe a year or something like that. But imagine, so let's rewind, Tyson, to when we were 18, 19, 20 years old. If we would have been able to see what it was if we gave any money away at all, or, what it was, or even in our early 20s, then once we got going a little bit in our careers, you can see your giving journey then. And so to have that history is something that I think is extremely valuable. It's been just 6 years for me. um, so now, imagine having 25 years or 30 years worth of that history. that's all summed up and aggregated, and we're going to continue to build the platform so that because now we're realizing people will maybe want a snapshot and they'll want to be able to. So we don't have the feature now that would provide any sort of graph or anything like that, but we're continually improving the platform, and we want to be able to tell snapshot stories for people.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. The way that you phrased it is it's your giving journal. Like one of the three treasures that we leave behind is not the money, but they say
Hmm.
it's the pictures, it's our
Yeah,
library, right? It's like what did we read to become who we are? And then it's our
yeah,
journals, right? Like what were we thinking at that time
yeah,
and how did we make those decisions? But having a giving journal, I think that's like a fourth treasure to have in a family to say, hey, this is what we supported and this is what we believe in and this is how we helped out. I
yeah,
think that's really cool.
yeah, yeah. It's I like that. Yeah, it's our library.
Yeah.
What were grandma and grandpa reading through the years, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, wouldn't you love to
And
know? As most people don't get
yeah,
to hold on to that stuff because we don't have capacity, we don't have space.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it'll be great to know.
yeah,
Dan, I want to thank you very much for coming on and doing all of this. And I know as soon as we get off of here, I'm going to be like, man, I have like 10 questions that I wish I asked. And so I'd love to have you back on in the near future and kind of explore a couple of other options. But where can people find you or GiveWise online?
yeah. So givewise.ca, and look me up on LinkedIn. My last name's spelled Kyte, so Dan Kyte. I'm on LinkedIn. I welcome questions and and phone calls and whatnot. So people can get a hold of us. We don't have the .com domain. Someone snagged it and is trying to charge us pirate amounts to own the .com domain. So we have
Right.
the .c domain.
Okay.
Man, the internet is full of pirates, isn't it?
Isn't it?
It's full of good people too. But yeah, so givewise.ca, and it's been a huge privilege to be on here and get to talk about what, as people can probably tell, I get excited about.
That's good. That's good. You got to have a passion for what you do so that you can keep doing it. And I think that's really cool. It really comes through. So, Dan, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Tyson. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Three Seasons podcast. If you like this content, please feel free to like and subscribe, leave a comment or a question or anything that you'd like to know further about, and stay tuned for more episodes. Thank you.